समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
If you want to learn about politics, if you want to understand politics, come to Bihar. That is the oldest wisdom. I would fine tune it. However, just to say that if you want to learn about Hindi heartland politics, the Hindi zone politics, then come to Bihar. That's because everybody in Bihar lives politics and talks politics. It's also a very open place for talking politics on the street, on a chai shop, in a village. It can be men, it can be women. Bihar, so many of my fellow travelers during elections have told me, women fellow travelers, that in Bihar you don't find that much of the male gaze as you might in other parts of North India. Also, even the women are a lot more open, a lot less hesitant to give you their views than in other states. That's the reason, that's all the more reason why Bihar is a good place to learn about Hindi heartland politics. Also in Bihar, there's been change. For a long time, there was no change and there was change. So what am I doing? What I'm doing is, since I've been traveling in Bihar now for nearly 30 years, during elections and writings on the wall, you know that series, I'm now giving you the video version of the ones that I have done so far. So I gave you earlier, a couple of weeks back, I had given you the video version of the Writings on the Wall episode that I had done early in 2005. That was the election when we said it looked like there was some stirrings in Bihar, and we said from our earlier travels that in large parts of India, particularly in the Hindi heartland, that is Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh, the yearning seemed to be for Bijli Sadak Pani, that is power, electricity, roads and water. Now in Bihar, you could add one more thing, that's padhai, that's education. That's where we were in the first writings on the wall that we wrote early in 2005. Then in November, we were back in Bihar, and that resulted in one more episode of writings on the wall. Why? Because the first one was inconclusive, so you had a second one that became a kind of a runoff. So this episode of writings on the wall was written on the eve of that second election in 2005. That is when Nitish Kumar came to power for the first time. This was written on the last day of polling in Bihar. So on the last day of polling in Bihar, the question you were asked, we were asked, particularly if you were just back from there, is still the same as you would have been asked in the past many elections or in the future elections. Is Bihar ready for a change? Isn't that the question even now in 2025? Is Bihar ready for a change? Now, you can look at it in two different ways. Does change mean a defeat for Lalu 2005 November? Does change mean a defeat for Lalu and his RJD and the arrival in power of a new coalition under Nitish Kumar? Or does it mean a change of mindset and aspiration from mere social justice, a voice for the lower castes, or oppressed castes, to economic upliftment and dignity, or to put it simply, Bijli, Sadak, Pani and Padhai, that is electricity, roads, water and education. If your spin is the first one, I said, then talk to exit pollsters if you want to know who's going to win. I will say that this time also. However large your sample, you have to be a genuine braveheart or thoroughly reckless to make a prediction in Bihar. In fact, in any election, least of all in Bihar, with now such a complex vote division. The electorate is so split, so much vote is already committed one way or the other, so little can float, and there is no knowing how much of this would swing how many seats. But stirrings of aspiration for a better life, better roads, a light bulb in my home, teachers in my village school, a doctor in my primary health center. Just maybe you have begun to get a sense of that this time around, November 2005. Remember? Another thing you have begun to feel even more palpably is the belief that truly fair, fearless elections can actually be held even in Bihar. We, the usual group of limousine liberals, a motley assortment of journalists, psephologists, bankers, executives, and sometimes part time politicians that trolls voting zones in each election, catches up with the real hero of this round. That is the second round in 2005, the real hero of that round in Bihar. The Election Commission's observer, KJ Rao, in the circuit house of Betia, the district headquarters of West Champaran district. He is kind to us but would say nothing on the record. In fact, we can hardly hold him to a two-sentence conversation before his phone rings again and again and again. And while I would never violate my reporter's ethic in never mentioning a word spoken off the record, I feel less queasy picking up snatches of his phone conversations, at least from one end, from his end. Okay, okay, I understand. He would say, okay, okay, I understand. No, please, I have decided you will have a new STPO before this afternoon. STPO is a bit like DSP of police. This one will be sent out to you. I presume this is all about some subdivisional police officer who was not being compliant enough with the election commission. Next, some more conversations. While he was also having conversations with us in the short of brief periods when his phone wasn't ringing. What endures in my head from that episode are those three words: no shortcuts. Three words: no shortcuts. Once you get committed to that very short mantra, no shortcuts, you realize the power of one man, just one man, a retired civil servant, now re employed on contract, not even an IS officer, and one who has brought about a paradigm shift you never thought was possible in Indian democracy. A free and fair election in Bihar, you can ask whom you want, a villager from any caste. This I'm again taking you back to November 2005. You can ask a villager from any caste, a local policeman, or one among very alien looking patrols of Punjab police, 9 battalions of which have been employed among a medley of central and other state police forces, helping the election commission in that November 2005 election in Bihar. Their presence told us that this is the fairest election in Bihar's history. In fact, Mr. KJ Rao resurfaced in my life in a way when he wrote his book, The Cobra Dancer, and wanted me to come and speak at the book release. And that's where we had S.Y. Qureshi, the former Chief Election Commissioner, also Justice J.S. Verma, the former Chief Justice of India. And that's where I raised a question. I asked Justice Verma a question because I was moderating that conversation. And I asked him that, look, you changed the Supreme Court of India. You were called Mr. Justice by India Today in its cover story. The headline was Mr. Justice. T.N. Session changed the Election Commission of India. KJ Rao defined the way elections will now be held in Bihar. So, can one man change an institution? Can one man define an institution? And that is where J.S. Verma gave a great mantra. He said, yes, one individual can do it. One individual can revolutionize an institution provided two conditions are met. And what were those two conditions? He said, one, he must not have anything in his past, or these days, modern language, they must not have anything in their past, nor any expectation in the future. Then you can change an institution in one lifetime. That is something that I wrote in National Interest about, of which I'll share a copy with you with the description. But this is the KJ Rao, and you can see also the jacket of his book on your screens. None of Lalu's opponents have any complaints anymore. This is in present tense because this is written in November 2005. In fact, Lalu's opponents tried not to compliment Rao so much that he begins to look partisan. We were witness to a particularly delicious moment. At his late afternoon rally in Motihari, L.K. Advani hailed the power of one man in ensuring a fair Bihar election and then bent sideways in mock pretense to ask what his name was, ask his audience. But he was far too rushed to wait for somebody to fill in and said something like, "What is his name?" Yes, KJ Rao. Advani himself gave the story away. He was in such a hurry that you thought he needed to take some acting lessons from Lalu first, because Lalu would never have made that mistake. But Advani could perhaps be excused. It was well past 4. All helicopters have to report back in Patna before 5 p.m. in November, as no night flying is permitted anywhere in India for civilian helicopters. And not to take any chances, his pilot had already turned on the rotors while he was halfway through his 7-minute speech. But whoever wins will have the satisfaction of winning what is possibly the first fair election, or rather, the fairest election in Bihar's history. It is to this that many would ascribe the low turnout this time. Nitish tells us not to complain about falling turnouts because Bihar no longer has booths that show more than 90% voting, implying that these were captured in the path and ballot boxes were stuffed. I will tell you a little story. In those days, when you traveled in Bihar and large parts of Uttar Pradesh, both western and eastern Uttar Pradesh, you heard a description, and it was used flatteringly about people. So and so local politician, वो यहाँ का सबसे बड़ा booth लुटेरा है. He's the biggest looter of booths, polling booths. People were referred to like that. Such and such Singh booth lutera. Such and such booth lutera. Booth lutera was like a title and something that people carried proudly. Lalu, however, will not say that higher turnouts earlier were because of booth capturing and stuffing of ballot boxes. He says the low turnout is because of the panic spread by Rao. But if you ask the common person, even in Champaran, bordering Nepal's Maoist heartland and one of the most lawless zones in Bihar, and he will tell you the region has never been safer. The central forces are wonderful, they say. And you speak to district officials and local journalists, and they tell you of the electrifying effect KJ Rao's firmness has had on the situation. In the very colonial Circuit House's drawing room, Rao spends no more than half an hour with us, much of which is consumed by his cell phone, then says a breezy goodbye and bounces down the wooden staircase like a Montgomery out to take on Rommel in Al Alamein. How does a man of 63 have so much energy, so much dash? Asks one of the bankers amongst us. He could have also added, and what drives him to do so? At a salary of no more than 30,000 rupees or so a month, 2005. 30,000 rupees or so a month. Even then, it was a very small amount. Of course, like all men who make a difference, Rao has his critics, notably in the IAS. He was around the last time also, IAS officers told us. So how come you people did not hail him as such a hero then, they ask. The implication is it isn't just Rao who has made the difference. It is also the absence of Lalu from power in the state for more than 6 months. Because I told you the first election was inconclusive, the second was about 6-8 months later, and in the middle, the state had president's rule. Can a fair election change people's lives in a place like Bihar? If you drive particularly at night, you could get very despondent. You might occasionally spot a signboard telling you this is National Highway 28, but it really is a moonscape where you maneuver your way from crater to crater. After a while, your body even learns to adjust to the craters. As you get out of a crater, your body instinctively twists itself to endure the next one. This is really far in the east in Bihar, so the sun sets very early and then it is total darkness. Remember, it's not like this right now. I'm taking you back to 2005 because we are looking at the way Bihar's politics and Bihar's mind has evolved over time. That is the purpose of this series of writings on the wall. Once the sun sets, there is total darkness, barring your headlights. You drive past one village after another in complete darkness. Not even one bulb anywhere for miles. People are mostly indoors, so by 7 p.m. or so, it is all so quiet that you wonder if you're going past ghost habitations with elephant grass and sugarcane, patches of elephant grass and sugarcane between them. And yet, you see creativity and talent in ornate words of welcome written on the walls of people's huts. Figures of animals, words of welcome, figures of animals, little namastes, and gods painted outside the baked mud and dung walls of people's homes. All kacha homes, walls made of baked mud and a coating of cow dung. Surprise of surprises, we suddenly find lights. In fact, an entirely lit village called Dumaria. We make a stop at the local Zamidar's home, straight out of a 1960s socialist movie, including 10 tiger trophies on the walls of its main hall, all shot before 1960, we are told, except that the current CN sounds as frustrated as the commoners of his village might. Rananjay Shahi is a graduate of St. Stephen's College and says he came back to Dumaria fired by idealism. But that was in the past. Now there is very little confidence. Anybody can change anything. This village is better organized. It got power lines because of political clout. And now some of the better off families collectively maintain just not their power supply, but even the branch line from the Gandak Canal, which turns Dumaria into an island of relative prosperity. But you cannot fix everything. It's just one village. This region is infested with cobras and kraits, very deadly snakes, kraits, in fact, sometimes deadlier than cobras. And you hear about the subdivisional magistrate of nearby Narkatiyaganj who was bitten by a snake. The closest place you could find some anti-venom serum was Patna, which is at least 8 hours of driving time away on roads which were mostly even worse than the NH28 we were traveling on, that I described to you in terms of crater after crater. But the IAS knows how to look after its own. The chief secretary intervened. A doctor started from Patna by road with the serum, just as the stricken SDO started from Narkatiyaganj. They made a rendezvous midway in about 4 hours, and the serum was administered successfully. A life was saved, though it must have been a rather gentle crate to have given the man full 4 hours. Drive through Bihar, and you will hear tales like these at every mile. But they all add up to one basic fact. The state may have cradled JP's total revolution in the 70s and Lalu's social justice revolution, also very significant. Lalu's social justice revolution in the 90s. What it needs now is a spell of half decent governance. So, the most vital question of this election is one that no pollster can answer. Will this change this time? Will the idea of social justice evolve into a yearning for better governance? We, the limousine liberals, will surely check it on our next trip to Bihar. Let's only hope it does not have to come as soon as this one did after the last one. Now, after this, we had one in 2010, which also I will convert into video and share with you in the next few days. In fact, as a matter of fact, as we know, this second election of 2005 brought Nitish Kumar into power, and since then he's mostly been in power. So after 2005, the next edition of Writings on the Wall from Bihar was in 2010, which also I will render in a video version and share with you soon. And as we head towards elections, I will share the rest also that we have done in the past, and then at some point of time I will travel during these elections in Bihar and give you the current picture as well.